Hi, everyone. It's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And it's time for another Thursday afternoon YouTube Live. I'm so excited today because I have a guest. I have a friend, Mary Eberle, who is a DNA expert with me today. And before we talk to Beverly, I see that we already have some folks who've told us where they're from. We've got Lily from Southern Mississippi. Thank you so much for coming back this week, Lily. And we have Karen from Maryland and Bobby from Northern Wisconsin. So Mary was like, because Mary, you're from Wisconsin?
I
Yeah,
am.
yeah, that was what I was thinking. I don't know. All of a sudden, in that one moment, I had this blank of like, is she from Michigan for some reason? But no, I know I knew it was Michigan or Wisconsin. So great, guys. If you are just joining us, welcome. Feel free to drop a comment over there. Let us know where you're listening from. It's always kind of fun to see where people are coming from. And also it lets me know that everything's working well and that you can see us and that you can hear us and all of that good stuff. So hi, Melinda is from Buffalo, New York. I'm actually sitting at my home in North Carolina, and Mary is in Wisconsin. So we are kind of from all over. We've got Tony from Kansas. Yay! So as everybody's coming in, again, welcome. If this is your first time coming, thank you so much for tuning in. Feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. I'll be watching that as we chat. And you can ask me a question. You can ask Mary a question as we go along. We're happy to answer questions and help you guys out as best we can. So feel free to do that. Yeah, and as far as what's going on over at Are You My Cousin this week? Well, it's still kind of a busy and happening place over there, working very hard behind the scenes, getting some things going, updating some old posts for you guys because I've got some great new information to watch out for. There's going to be a free webinar coming up next week, so watch the website for that and watch your Monday email for that. If you're not on my email list, I would love for you to join that if that's something you would wish. I send out emails every Monday, and I promise to never send you guys fluff. I only send valuable information that you can use. And so you'll have all the details and the links to the free webinar next week. It will be with, I'm joining with Vivid Pics, and we are going to be bringing you a webinar next Wednesday, May 20th. 2020, I should say, I guess in case you're watching this on the replay, it'll be at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and we will be talking about restoring your family history and connecting with family history through photographs. So you don't want to miss that. Okay, let's see who else is here because I see things popping up. We've got, hey, Dawn from Georgia. Yay, you're back. And we've got somebody we got Philly. All right. Is it Phil from Phoenix? Kathy from Ohio, Patty from Oregon, Donna from Texas, and Paula from New Jersey. So we are really all over the place. I think that's fabulous. And we are here to talk about a subject today that, well, I'm going to be honest with you, is not my strong suit. So I have my friend Mary Eberle here with me today, and we are going to be talking about DNA. Because let me introduce Mary to you because she is the expert, guys. She founded, DNA Hunters back in 2015, and she's had careers. I love this. She's had careers in biotech patent attorney. You're a biotech patent attorney, correct? And a scientist. So she's really kind of got that whole scientific, and I have a science background. I don't know, Mary, if you know this, but I actually went into the medical side of things. So I was a physical therapist. So we kind of, both of us have kind of ended up in genealogy and the DNA world completely separate paths, but from different paths, and I should say non-genealogy paths is what I'm trying to say. So, but Mary has really focused on DNA. She uses that DNA. That's kind of her superpower to help find birth parents of adoptees and other unknown parents and grandparents. So she uses the DNA. She analyzes it. She compares it with the genealogy records, as many of us know to do, and then she can explain those results to the families. She's very clear with it. She's got a really good clarity when she gives that. So I am so excited to have you here with us, Mary, today to answer some of these DNA questions. So yes. So Mary, let's get started. We'll just jump right in. If you want to.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me too. I appreciate it. It's great.
You're welcome. You're welcome. This is definitely, DNA is something I understand enough about to get myself probably in serious trouble. I can do the basics, but I know that it's such a subspecialty that I know that there are folks like you who specialize in it. And so I'm always going to defer to you guys because, you guys already have that and there's such a learning curve sometimes, but I am excited to hear more about it today, particularly in the realm when we talk about the adoptee type research, because I have a lot of folks who ask about that kind of thing. So how do you combine like the DNA and the genealogy, and you're finding birth parents and those adoptees or really just unknown parents, because I think we all have those in our genealogy research.
Right. Once you go far enough back in your tree, you end up with the roadblock, and DNA can help. And I have my clients test at various DNA testing companies. So Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, and MyHeritage are the big four. And I'm looking at their matches and trying to see, so for an adoptee or somebody else with an unknown birth parent, I will look at their matches and see who are their shared matches.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we've got one match, so it's a pretty strong match, and I want to see who is related to them and the adoptee.
Okay.
So I'm creating these clusters of cousins, and I'm looking at the trees of those people. Some people have trees, some people don't. Ancestry has the most trees. As we all know, they're not perfect, and we have these errors being perpetuated. But I'm looking to see, like, is there a surname in common, or a location, or place, time, or surname?
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully I can find like what ties that group of people together, and from there, if there's enough information through their trees and the vital records, I'm able to build out trees for these matches.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you know.
So you're essentially building, so you are creating not only your client's tree, but the trees for their matches. So you might actually end up creating entire trees for a match as well. Correct? Right. Okay. Right. And you talk, about having them to test at different the different testing companies. Do you typically have them test at all of them, or do you have a strategy and then you upload raw data somewhere else? How do you do that, or what's your recommendation on that?
I like for them to start at Ancestry, and that's because it's got the largest group of people who've tested there. Mm-hmm. And they've got some good tools and a lot of family trees. And, if that's not enough to solve the mystery, then I'll have them transfer, and you can transfer your raw results, like you said, into Family Tree DNA and into MyHeritage. It's actually free to do that, but there's a small fee that you can pay those companies in order to unlock all the features as if you've tested there in the first place.
But it's less expensive than like if they just did a whole another test. They can just kind of, that's not, I don't know if I knew that or not. I knew there was something with that. I didn't realize that's how it worked. So that's good to know.
It's really inexpensive. It's $19 for Family Tree and $29 for MyHeritage. And, a normal test we say is about $99. Mm-hmm. So you're saving a significant amount of money if you're able to transfer.
Right.
And then there's also 23andMe, and that you can't transfer into that. So if I need additional matches, then I'm asking people to test at 23andMe if they haven't already tested there. Mm-hmm. And, each company gives you different things. 23andMe, actually, it gives you your mitochondrial haplogroup, which mm-hmm. is basically the type of mitochondrial DNA you have. And that can be useful in solving these mysteries. And then if you have a Y chromosome, so males have Y chromosomes, it will tell you your basic YDNA type. So that's also interesting. If, like, for example, if we've got a male looking for his father or his birth, of somebody up that direct father's line, then that YDNA haplogroup can be very handy.
Right. Because, it's interesting because I don't really hear, when DNA first came out, you heard a lot about the YDNA testing, and we don't hear quite as much about that, I guess, and things have advanced so much more. But yeah, the YDNA, definitely, it actually solved a mystery in our family, going back quite a ways. So that's an interesting thing. I don't see many people talking about that or looking at the YDNA as much these days. So that's an interesting thing. So what kinds of like profound answers, what kind of profound impacts can you find with these DNA tests?
Well, for people that have, a missing relative, and I think in particular, if it's really a close relative, like a parent, and they might have wondered their whole lives who that person was. And all of a sudden, now with the DNA testing, for a lot of people, we're able to figure out who their birth parent was. And I'm not an adoptee, so I can't speak, from that perspective. But from my clients, it just, the impact just seems so profound that, this piece that they've always wondered about is now they have it, and they know something about that person. Even if they're deceased, they know where they lived, about maybe their occupation, their family, and then going further up the tree, now they can find all these other ancestors that they never knew about. And, just that, not everybody, but a lot of people wonder, who am I biologically?
So when you have your clients, they've done the DNA test and you find some matches, how do you go about contacting those matches to you, and to try to as you continue to solve the or work toward that question for the adoptee, or just who that missing family member is? I mean, I can imagine that can be a very sensitive issue. How do you go about? Honestly, I think I would be kind of intimidated about it.
That's a great question. I was taught that it's okay for me to reach out to distant cousins. So let's say, my client has a match and there's a second cousin out there and he or she doesn't have a tree, or their tree is locked. And I feel comfortable saying, hi, I'm helping so-and-so. Could you please share your tree with us? And of course I have permission from the client to do that. But when it gets to be like a birth parent or potential half sibling, then I'm supporting my clients and asking them to reach out themselves.
Okay.
And the support comes from, there is a model letter that Leah LaPearl Larkin put together a few years ago in 2017. And it's a really great letter because it's a form letter. So you fill in the blanks, and it doesn't say like, hey, you, Mr. So-and-so, you're my birth father. It doesn't like make somebody defensive. And instead it steps them through, like, here's what happened. I'm an adoptee. I did DNA testing. I matched these people, and I was just wondering, can you help me out?
Okay.
I was born in wherever in this year. If the birth mother, you might say my birth mother was so-and-so, so that the recipient of that letter can get it and read it and, think it through. And, it basically has them coming to the conclusion and, and deciding, am I going to respond? What am I going to do? And
Right.
and I think that just lays such a better framework for reaching out to somebody. I also provide people with the contact information.
Mhm.
So I have subscriptions to different websites like Been Verified,
Mhm.
and that through that I can find out like public information which has been gathered. So phone numbers, email addresses, mailing addresses, that kind of thing.
Right.
And there's another great resource that I share, which is a book that came out just over a year ago that is the DNA Adoptees Guide. I'm sorry, the guy. I guess I'll share it with you later. But the authors are Brianne Kirkpatrick
Mhm.
and Combs Bennett, and I think it's called The Adoptees Guide to DNA. And
Yeah.
what I really love about that book is that it talks about, you should decide what you want, and you should be aware of the possible consequences,
Mhm.
right? Like, for example, you might get rejected, you might get brought in by part of the family, but not the other part of the family. And it just does a really nice job of talking through different possibilities and getting people ready to reach out.
That's a good way to do that. I know periodically, I think, and I had shared with you before that, occasionally just because I do have so many, I'm on so many sites and have the trees that people do occasionally reach out. And typically it's kind of distant off, but I always feel a little unsure just because, it's not so much my story and how to approach that. So that's an interesting, um, I would like to actually read the book just so I have that knowledge and that background for that kind of thing. Karen had a question in the comments about where they can find that model letter that you talked about. Is it actually out there online?
Yep. If you Google letter to a birth parent and then the DNA Geek,
DNA Geek. Okay.
you should come up with it.
Okay. And guys, what I'll do is I will make sure when all is said and done, I will grab that link and pop that into the description below so you can grab that too. So if you're watching this on replay, check the description below and I'll have that. And I'll also find a link to the adoptees book that she mentioned as well. So I'll make sure I have those out there. So that'll be good. Let me just make myself a note here. So yeah, that'll be good. Thank you so much for that. That's an interesting, I wasn't aware of those resources that were out there. So now you had an interesting story that you were telling me, kind of outlined a little bit earlier today about, it was actually a North Carolina connection, but it was a story and the BBC was actually following this whole story. Do you want to share that with us?
Sure. A few years ago, I was approached to help someone, and she is an adoptee living in England, and her mother is a Vietnamese woman, and her father was a Vietnamese soldier from the United States. And, she had done DNA testing, and she was living in England, which is really interesting, but a lot of those babies were airlifted out of Vietnam during the war. And she was adopted by a couple in England, and yet she always wanted to figure out who her birth parents were. And when she tested, she had a cousin up in the Twin Cities, up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they hired me to help them find her father. And he was an African-American soldier, which makes it so much more difficult to do the genealogy. So as we know from Henry Louis Gates's TV show, that's how I learned this. Maybe since you work with Southern genealogy, you probably know this way better than I do. But, before the Civil War, the African-American slaves were not counted, other than saying, 5 women this age, 6 men that age, and so on. They did not have their names in the census unless they were freed. And so it was a really, really tough case, but we kept on pursuing and kept on pursuing. And one day she had a match that was a really close match. And it turned out to be a half first cousin. And he helped us find her birth father, who, was still alive. He was in his 70s. And, I remember looking at the statistics for Vietnam vets, like how many of them are alive. It's not very many. A lot of people died in Vietnam. Right. A lot of people came home and they died, a lot of them were homeless. And in the end, here he was in a nursing home in North Carolina. Wow. And, they did do some FaceTime or Skyping, but she raised enough money to come to the US, and the BBC came with her and her son, and they filmed the in-person reunion in this nursing home in North Carolina. Wow. And, I just remember the first time I saw his picture, like I burst into tears, to think like, oh my God, we found him. Like, I can't believe we found him. It's just amazing that he's still around. And he was very welcoming. He had children from his wife in the United States after the war, and they welcomed her. And, now they have an English cousin, right, with a great English accent. And, it's just so heartwarming to see that, the DNA was what brought them together, and that you could do this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one thing that too struck me is, and I guess my question is, you said eventually you found the DNA hit with that half first cousin. How long was that time period? Because it kind of reiterates, a lot of times folks will tell me, I did DNA, but I didn't get any hits, or I didn't get any matches. I'm like, well, you just, it's a bit of a waiting game. Sometimes you have to wait until more data comes. Was it a long period of time for you guys to do this?
We probably worked together about a year. Okay. And this was a few years ago, so fewer people had tested at that time. Mm-hmm. But like, I have another case out of Illinois where I helped him in 2017, and it was he put a limit on the number of hours I could spend, and it was like, well, it doesn't, I just wasn't for sure. Right. And then, the phone rings last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and he says, hey, Mary, I want to do this. Can you reopen my case? And, within a really short amount of time, I learned he had these brand new matches that were much closer. And right now we've got it narrowed down to 2 possible birth fathers.
Oh, wow. That's great. So it was just a matter of time and letting things get kind of come up.
Mm-hmm. More people testing. Mm-hmm. And more people testing, basically.
That's great. So someone asked in the chat, they're from Chattanooga. Oh, hey. It says, my friend is into genealogy. His mom is dead, said against it, and said they're not accurate. He shouldn't waste his money. Is that true? So I'm going to say dead set against genealogy research, or dead set against maybe DNA is what they're inferring there.
Right. So I think there are a couple of issues here, right? One is the possibility that she's objecting, the mother, because she knows she has a secret, and she's afraid that the secret's going to come out if the child tests.
Gotcha.
In terms of the accuracy, we get our matches, and those really close matches, even your second cousin or your third cousin, those are accurate. Somebody sharing a tiny piece of DNA with you, and it says it's your 4th to 8th cousin, those aren't so accurate. It may be, it might not be. And then we also have the ethnicity testing. And that's like the least accurate part of the DNA testing.
Okay.
But at the same time, it can be extremely accurate. It really varies. And just last night, I was building a tree for a client's DNA match, and his father is Eastern European, and his mother is part Irish and part Scottish. Okay. Mm-hmm. And my client is Eastern European. So I know they're related through his father.
Right.
And then I looked at the match's ethnicity estimate, and it was basically 50% Eastern European, 50% Scottish and Irish. And I was like, oh, well, what do you know? That's the tree I built for him.
Yeah. That works. That is good. Yeah, it's an interesting, I love how it kind of all comes together eventually, hopefully. So what are you thinking about, like, with the whole COVID-19 thing? Is that impacting DNA testing? Is it impacting people wanting to find family, or what are you seeing with all that?
It's definitely impacting people wanting to find family. And the really nice benefit of that is that sometimes we send these messages on Ancestry or 23andMe or MyHeritage, and it goes through their messaging system. And we're never quite sure, like, did my match get my message, or did that person, with the tree that I wanted to look at, did they get my message? And what we're seeing is that people are like reopening their accounts, and they're looking at their messages, and we're getting responses to messages that were sent out, like over the past year or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's worthwhile to send new messages to new people, just because during this time when we're at home and looking for things to do, this is something that people are doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that too. I think some with what I do with people coming to me and asking questions, and just seeing what people, I'm seeing more and more people on there, definitely, and I'm reaching out. And I think it's because we have time, and we have time to connect actually with family, perhaps in ways we haven't before. So, all right, we have one more DNA question over here in the chat. It says, I wish more DNA studies would be done in Afghanistan. In the north of the country, you see a large influence from Alexander the Great's invasion. Some of them have red eyes or blonde hair with blue eyes. Yeah, I mean, I think there are different kind of pockets in different areas like that where you would have, where we typically think of certain characteristics being associated with ethnic groups, but they actually within can have, I guess, more of a minority ethnic group that has very unique features. Does that make sense? What I just, I expect you to see some of that more in what you're doing as well. So that's an interesting thought too.
Yeah, that reminds me, I have a friend her parents are from India, and she has a beta thalassemia gene that came in with the Greeks. Like when the Greeks and the people from the Middle East invaded India, right? And you can see that in their architecture, but it's also in their DNA.
Tell people what the beta thalassemia is. They might not know what that is.
Oh, sure. Well, and I don't have a super great understanding, but it's something in your blood. So a mutation in your blood, and there are different forms of it, and some forms have a big impact and some have a small impact. And she's got the one with a small impact on her health. But, it's just these, as people migrate and as people invade, we see these the mixtures of DNA happening. And then, they're there still today.
Yeah. Oh, it is interesting. So that kind of brings up another question, would be, the health, some of the DNA kits now are doing the health piece of it. And, what I haven't really looked at those. What can you really learn or not learn? I mean, are there some false assumptions people are out there about these, or can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Sure. I think that there are false assumptions. I remember having dinner with a really smart man, a friend of ours, and he said, "Oh, I tested at 23andMe, and like they screen for all of these diseases, and I'm perfectly healthy." And in the beginning, when they first started testing, they did tell you quite a bit of health information, but then the FDA shut them down and said, you are not complying with the law, and you cannot offer any of this health information. And in the meantime, they have received approval for something like 10 diseases. So they can take your sample and they can check these 10 diseases, some of which only impact certain communities. Mm-hmm. For example, they do the BRCA1, BRCA2 testing mm-hmm. for breast cancer and other related cancers. But they're only looking for 3 mutations. And there are 1,000 mutations in that gene that lead to the cancer.
Right.
Those 3 that they're checking for are the most common in the Ashkenazi Jewish population. Mm-hmm. So, if that's your heritage, whether you know it is or it's revealed through your DNA testing, that's an important test. But, if you don't have that heritage and you're worried that you're going to get breast cancer, you do the test and you didn't see the fine print that said, hey, by the way, this is only relevant for this one population. You might think, well, I'm in the all clear because my 23andMe test came back negative. Mm-hmm. So, things like that it worries me that, people think like, oh, well, I did this test and it's, like they'll test for Alzheimer's, but when you look at the fine print, it's only late onset Alzheimer's.
Oh, there's a difference. There's a big difference there. Yeah. Well, I kind of wondered the same things. I haven't really looked into them that much, and people have, my family's like, oh, did you test for this or that? And I'm like, well, no, I haven't gone the health route, partly, mainly because I think that it can show a predisposition, but not necessarily, there's a lot more that goes into having, being testing positive for certain genes. There's a lot of other things that go into whether you develop certain diseases or not too as well. So I just was a little concerned. I share your concerns as well. I did not realize quite how narrow on some of the populations those things are. So that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's got me thinking a little more definitely on that end of things. So yeah. So right. With the health testing, and I know this is a question that sometimes people have, is there anything in the DNA testing market now that will tell you, are you going to get COVID-19, or do you have certain genes? It will tell you if you can fight it off. I mean, I know that's been on everybody's mind. I've been hearing those questions in some of the DNA group or some of the genealogy groups I'm in. Do you have any insight on that?
I think that people are studying it. I listened to one podcast where they talk about science and evolution and virology, and they said that people are studying it to see if there are certain genes that you might have that would make you like more susceptible or less susceptible. And I think those studies are underway, mm-hmm. but I don't think there's anything out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I've kind of had heard. I mean, there's nothing out there yet that can address that type of thing. So, because it's still so new and so everything. All right. We got some more questions, more comments. Let's see. Bobby says she's watching 6 kits for people with unknown parentage is in the past month or so, the new matches have dropped on Ancestry to less than half of what they were 2 months ago. Have you noticed that?
I haven't.
I was going to say, I think you said you were seeing more.
More messages and more matches, at least for those kids that were on the back burner for some time.
So could some of this happen? So if like 2 months ago, they were at a certain level, because those were probably the results from all those folks who were getting them at Christmas, which they tend to get flooded with. And then when they all return them. So I'm wondering if Bobby's seeing a little bit, that might account for some of the dip. You'll see it around holidays when they're big sales. And then you'll see, like 6 weeks later, then there's a big surge and then a drop off, I'm thinking. So that might be it, Bobby, that you were seeing the results from the holidays and those gift sales. And Sue said, is there a great difference between American Indian ancestry on Ancestry versus MyHeritage, and what makes up a percentage? It's a good question.
Oh, boy. Well, historically, it was said that 23andMe was the best at detecting a small percent of Native heritage, or Native DNA, I should say. But today, I know Ancestry, the way they look at the DNA is much more like how 23andMe does it. And and they've also added in more communities. So they're basically subsets of ethnicity estimates. So they might say you've got some DNA that is associated with Native peoples in South America or Central America. And I'm not familiar with MyHeritage and their Native American testing. I would say in general, I don't like using the ethnicity estimates from MyHeritage.
Really?
They just a lot of times I can explain the differences between the other three. Whereas MyHeritage, it's just I don't know where that came from. And this is actually a topic that I talk about. I do full 1 hour long talks about ethnicity estimates.
Oh, wow.
And, like I said before, last night where I was oh my gosh, the tree for this match aligns perfectly with his ethnicity estimate. It's yes. So I'm really into ethnicity estimates because I think that they're useful in trying to figure out mysteries. It's another piece of evidence that we're adding into the analysis. And we're when people say oh, I just ignore that, I'm always no, don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. You paid for it, and think about it. It's kind of like saying well, I'm just going to ignore birth certificates because I don't think those are always right.
Yeah. Of course, when mine's 95% English, it's it gets hard to figure it out. But so Paula also asked, she said she'd heard anything less than 4% can be considered background noise. Is that true? I guess in that ethnicity breakdown.
In the breakdown, when I took a class from Cece Moore, she said anything under 1%.
Okay. I was going to say, I was thinking it was closer down to that 1 or 2, 1 to 1.5% as opposed to the 4, because that's still an interesting thought there. So,
and in the end, it's really looking at your matches and seeing if they have that heritage in their trees. So if you show up 4% Native American, then your matches should have, if you're looking for that elusive Native ancestor, your matches should have some Native people in their trees, assuming it's recent enough in time. But, so putting that ethnicity estimate together with the matches to see if it all makes sense.
To see if it all, yeah. And that's exactly what you can't do paper genealogy, or you can't do DNA genealogy really without paper genealogy, correct? I mean, I think sometimes folks, they get into it thinking, oh, this will tell me everything. And it doesn't. You need, they support one another. Your records will support the DNA and the DNA supports the records type of things. So yeah, that's a real, that's an important point. I think sometimes people miss. And then again, just to reiterate what you said, as far as when you get matches and they don't have the trees, sometimes you just have to build the trees and see what you can find out. And you do sometimes, I'm sure, end up building trees that do not come to fruition for your research. But at the same time, as I tell people, it's never wasted research, because if nothing else, they've become a better researcher in the process. So anyway. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mary. Now, Mary, you actually have a freebie for our guests. Do you want to, and I'm going to pop it you tell us about it, and I'm going to pop it into the comment section.
Oh,
and for those watching on replay, check the description. It'll be there.
Sure. And I have to confess, this will be up within the hour, but I have a freebie. No, I think it's actually up now that I think about it. I think I did it way ahead of time, which, so there's a freebie. It's called a DNA roadmap, and it's a great tool for doing that transferring from company to company. And it shows you, like, if you started out at 23andMe, here are the places you can transfer to. Or if you started out at Ancestry, here's where you can transfer to. And it provides that roadmap to figure out where, what companies accept it and where you can go on that journey. And that is at DNAhunters.com/AYMC. So, are you my cousin?
Yeah, and I put that in the link in the comments, and then, like I said, for those watching on the replay, it'll be down in the description below, so you guys can grab that out. So, well, thank you so much, Mary. I'm so excited that you were able to join us, because you've answered, I think, a lot of questions. You've actually given me some really good information that I'm not as aware of, and so yes, I'm excited to have you on here and to get a chance to chat with you live.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks to the listeners. There were great questions, and you had great questions too.
Oh, well, thank you. And guys, I will also put in Mary's website as well, so you can find where to find her. And that is actually, it's just DNAhunters.com, right? Mm-hmm. And so just DNAhunters.com, guys, and you can find Mary over there. And I'll make sure. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always, message me, and I'll get you in touch with Mary if you need. All right. Well, guys, until next week, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for your great questions. And I will be back next Thursday to talk more genealogy. Bye, guys.
Bye.